My name is Kai-Shan Kong. I'm Assistant Professor of Chinese, and the course we're talking about is Chinese 201, Intermediate Chinese. So Chinese 201 is Intermediate Chinese. That means students have already finished 1 year, 2 semesters of Chinese 101, 102 before they take this one. Or students can take a placement test to be placed in 201 if the level is high enough. And the course objectives include helping students to develop more complex language proficiency and also to align with the UW-Eau Claire, the liberal education curriculum. Our course aligns with R2, meaning we want to help students develop skills to discuss the issues or the impact of systems, institutions, and issues in a local and global context and cross-culturally. So in order to satisfy these requirements and achieve the goals, my class is very learner-centered. It's also very interactive. I want to build many opportunities for my students to apply what they learn within the class and beyond the class. So for example, if I can give you an example, this semester the 201 learns 5 chapters, and that means 5 themes. And for each theme, if I see opportunities, I will engage my students to go outside to apply the knowledge. For instance, last week we were learning about directions. Like, it sounds very simple, you just learn left, right, inside, outside, up, down. But I wanted my students to have a chance to apply the knowledge, the language skills. We did a campus tour in Chinese outside the classroom. Each student in my class got to claim a building they would like to introduce, and they had some time to prepare. On the class day, we went out and each person had to use 100% Chinese to describe the campus, describe that particular building. And the rest of the class will act as international students, and they will need to listen, understand what the presenter has said. They need to raise follow-up questions. And I find it very helpful because our students not only get to learn and memorize and use the language, but also use it in an actual context. And that's helpful. Also because the LE goal requires us to engage our students to discuss impact of issues cross-culturally. I think it would be a great idea for me to engage people from other cultures, in particular Chinese culture in my case, to the classroom. So in my class, one of the feature activities is to engage international students on campus who are from Chinese-speaking regions to come to dialogue and converse with my students. The class you filmed yesterday was one of the weekly meetings we engaged international students to the classroom. So yesterday I had 8 international students from China. I believe all of them were from mainland China, and they are in the intensive English program on campus. So I talked with the faculty in the intensive English program. Every Wednesday, their students will come to my class and have dialogue with my students. We make it a tandem learning, and tandem learning means people from different target language come together and help each other with the language they are learning. So in our case, my students in the 201 class, they are all of them, I believe, all of them are first language speakers of the first language English, versus the Chinese students, the first language for them is Chinese, but they are learning each other's language. So they come to my class for 15 minutes. Half of the time, the Chinese international students will be speaking Chinese to help my students learn, to increase input and output. And the second half of the class, my students will speak English with the international students to discuss cultural aspects. So yesterday, the first half, they were helping my students, international students were helping my students to talk about campus routine, to talk about birthday parties in the US culture, in Chinese. And then the second half, the international students and my students spoke English to talk about the differences and similarities between birthday parties in China and birthday parties in the US. They also got to discuss Halloween because the holiday is coming. And for international students, they may be aware of Halloween. They probably don't know what people do. Does every American do the same thing for Halloween? So I think this is a great chance for them to hear different perspectives. And that is a very good example of how learner-centered, interactive, and global learning all happen within a local context. I want students to, it's a language course, and after all, I want students to be brave and take risks to learn a language. And actually, before the filming team came in yesterday, my students and I just had a dance to a Chinese fun, silly dance. And the message of doing that dance was to tell my students, when you learn a new culture, when you learn a language, you can't be too serious. Sometimes you need to make a fool of yourself. You need to, don't take it too personally. I want my students to know that regardless of what language they learn, they need to be brave to try different things. They need to remain open-minded and curious. At the same time, they need to be always respectful to another culture. Culture and language are so intertwined. And when we do this tandem learning, when my students talk with international students, I always encourage and remind both parties to remain respectful. You want to avoid and remind yourself, be mindful to avoid ethnocentric or judgmental comments when you hear something different. So that's the very important thing. I want my students to increase intercultural awareness and continue to develop intercultural communicative competence through their life.